The Disneyland Limited, now leaving for a grand circle tour of the Magic Kingdom. All passengers board.
Star Tours announces the boarding of the Endor Express. All passengers, please prepare for immediate boarding.
Please stand clear of the doors. Por favor, manténganse alejado de las puertas. To those guests who've just joined us, welcome. For those of you standing, please hold on to the handrails throughout our journey and stay clear of the door.
Please keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the train and remain seated at all times. Now then, hang on to them hats and glasses, because this here's the wildest ride in the wilderness.
I am Sam the American Eagle, and I am proud to introduce the Grand Circle Tour podcast, a celebration of Disney parks, but mostly the American ones. I really like these guys.
Hey everybody, welcome to this edition of the Grand Circle Tour podcast. I'm Caroline, and I am so happy that you joined us tonight. I'm here with my buddy Stan. Hey Stan.
Hey Caroline, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Walt's up.
I have exciting news for everyone listening to this, because we are coming up in 7 days of recording this, our 1-year anniversary of our podcast. And we are so excited with all the growth that we've had over the past year that we have the giveaway with KJ, or the contest with Kevin John. We're giving away one of his prints to one of our lucky listeners. All you got to do is like and share this episode or any other episode in the past few weeks. We have the Detour shows happening, and next week we're going to have our special 1-year anniversary extravaganza, and we're going to have everybody on that we can have on, and it's going to be the first time that we've all been on together since episode 0, our very first episode we recorded a year ago. And on top of it all, none of us are hosting this one. We're going to have a special host that you know his voice if you listen to the podcast, but you've never met him, and you do know his name though. So I'll keep that a little mystery. Special guest host next week that I think all of our listeners and our passengers will enjoy.
That sounds fantastic, and I'm looking forward to being there with you.
Oh, it's going to be a great show.
It is. And also, who's going to be there with us is George. What's up, George?
Hello, Caroline. Sadly, mine is not to sound like a Debbie Downer and anything, but I had to say this, but we had lost another Disney family member, Dave Smith, who was the founder of the Walt Disney Archives, passed away at the age of 78. And so I just had to give a shout out to his family, and prayers and condolences go out to him and his family during this rough time. And I have a friend on Facebook that had posted that he did his very last D23 Disney meet and greet, lunch with a legend at the studios in Burbank 3 weeks ago, and it was his last time that he actually got to see everyone. And I actually had the blessed opportunity to meet him several times through D23, so it was definitely a privilege that he actually got to take us around and tour the archives and the studios in Burbank.
Dang, that makes me sad.
Man. So it was,
Good.
Ron Miller first, and now Dave Smith. So we lost a few Disney greats.
Yeah, okay, well, let's turn this into more upbeat. Thank you for sharing that with us, George. I appreciate it. Today we are going to talk about our Disney stories. How it is that you got to be so obsessed with Disney that we're on a podcast. And we're grown-ups.
Talking about Cartoon Mouse.
Exactly. So Jim Gaffigan does this great comedy bit. Have you all heard it? Everybody look up the Jim Gaffigan comedy bit about adults going to Disney World and how they're all weirdos. Anyway, it's really funny. And if you're listening to this, you can appreciate it. So tonight we're going to share about our Disney story and how we came to love Disney the way that we do. So, Stan, will you start and share your story with us?
I think my story is fairly common amongst many Disney fans, where growing up in the early 70s, late 70s, The Wonderful World of Color was one of the Sunday night shows that I had to watch every week. And basically, for the younger passengers that don't know, The Wonderful World of Color was a show that was basically hosted by Walt. Even though he had already passed away, it was archival footage, and they reused footage. And he would introduce different Disney shows and cartoons. And one of the things that he would often do is he would talk about Disneyland and eventually Disney World a little bit towards the end. And he would show these videos of Disneyland, and to me as a kid, this place was amazing. And it was something that I always as a kid wanted to go. And after watching Walt talk about Tomorrowland and Fantasyland and Adventureland and Main Street USA, I'd run to my mom, I'd say, Mom, we have to go to Disneyland, let's go to Disneyland. And growing up in Canada, in a small town in northern Canada, it would be like, Stan, get it out of your head. You are not going to Disneyland. You are never going to Disneyland. And those, that always was in the back of my mind. You're never going to Disneyland. And I kind of when I grow up, I'm going to go to Disneyland. It was sort of my mentality. A few years, passed, and Star Wars came out, 1977. Again, I'm living in northern Canada. It didn't reach us until 1978 when I finally got to see it in the theater. The Marvel Comics was already out for a year before I got to see the movie in the theater, which was a weird experience because in the early versions of Marvel Comics, there's no Luke Skywalker. So I expect, who's this guy? So anyways, as you get older, and Star Wars had that dark period where it sort of disappeared. And, now my attention kind of changes to girls, and I end up getting married and have a few kids. And I still remember as a child wanting to go to Disneyland. I've never been. I'm now an adult. I have two daughters, never been to Disneyland. So I told my wife, I said, we're taking our kids to Disneyland, something that I never got to do as a child. And she was not a huge Disney fan. Now, we did have Eric and Little Mermaid on the top of our cake, on top of our wedding cake, so that we did have a bit of a Disney touch to our wedding.
Excuse me, wait, I have a question.
Yeah.
You're not really big Disney people, but you have Eric and Ariel on your wedding cake?
Yeah, let me explain that.
Can you explain that with more detail? Because that's got to be a really good story.
Well, my mom was a cake decorator, so she was making the cake. So she said, I'll go out, get whatever topper you want, and we'll put it on. So my wife and I were wanting to do a wedding more or less at a budget. And we were going to different wedding places where they sell cake toppers, and they're expensive. They're not cheap by any stretch of imagination. So we were actually in a toy store, because I was still into toys at the time. And there was a little PVC figurines of Ariel and Eric, and my wife has red hair, and Ariel has red hair. So it was actually her idea. She saw this, and it's not in their wedding gown outfits. It was in her plain blue outfit, and him with his kind of pirate-looking, with the red sash shirt. And she says, you know what, these would make a good cake topper, because it kind of looks, I was a lot, thinner and better looking back then.
He looks just like Eric. I just want everyone to know who can't see him. He looks just like Eric.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I said, yeah, this would be great. So we got those as our cake toppers. Now, I bring this to my mom, and I go, Mom, this is our cake toppers. And she's like, what the heck are you putting on top of your cake? These two cheap plastic. I'm making this beautiful 3-tier wedding cake, and you're putting these plastic figures on top? So, anyways, long story short, now we have children, and I'm pushing, we got to go to Disneyland. I mean, we're broke, as broke could be. We're both struggling to make ends meet. How we're going to go to Disneyland is, getting, become not a reality anymore. And meanwhile, Disney's advertising on TV that families can go for $75 a day per person, over how many days, how they advertise it now. So I'm thinking, I'm going to look into this, and the internet was just starting to come out. So I started researching Disneyland and how much it costs. And by now the kids are like 14 and 16. And I'm thinking, it's now or never. Like, if we don't do this once in a lifetime trip, we're never going to do this once in a lifetime trip. So the more I started researching it, the more I started to become interested in Disneyland. And now I'm starting, at the time I was so green, I didn't know the difference between Disneyland and Disney World. To me, I thought there was only one place. And I'm researching this, I'm like, holy crap, there's a Disney World? Like, I knew there was Disney World, I thought it was like the same thing. And I started researching Disney World, I'm like, this is unbelievable, like how much stuff there is here. I became really enthralled in it. So I went ahead and booked it. And we had the free dining package, and we had Port Orleans Riverside booked, and we were going for a week, and it was going to be the four of us, and it was going to be great. Our very first trip, we're getting ready to go, about a month away, everything's prepaid. My wife comes to me and she says that our youngest daughter, Allison, and I are not going. But you could go with Angela, the older daughter. And I'm like, what do you mean you're not going? It's all prepaid. I got the flights paid for. I got I've been talking about this for the past year. And she says, yeah, I'm getting sick of you talking about it so much. And Allison's afraid of flying. And so my oldest daughter and I, we went, and we had such a good time that we came home, put down the suitcases, I picked up the phone, didn't even bother unpacking, and I booked it for the following year, but this time for 2 weeks. And it's been kind of like a history ever since. Now, I just want to go back to the beginning where I talk about the Wonderful World of Color and how that kind of got me interested in the parks at the time. And there's no Wonderful World of Color. There's no real TV show talking about the parks anymore. And I'm kind of wondering what the kids that are growing up now that are 8 and 7 years old, what's going to happen when they become adults and have their own kids? Are they going to even know about Disneyland? Are they going to want to go to Disneyland? What is Disney doing now to get, because I talked to a lot of people, and the Wonderful World of Color was something that was the first turn of the key for them. Can you guys think of anything that Disney's doing now that would get people excited a generation from now?
Yeah, they have the Disney Channel, and they do all of that advertising and all that, featuring their parks on that.
I would have to say, just the way media is today with like technology and the internet, that back in the day, I think like the TV show was like the stepping stone for all this. And now I think with Disney advertising online and even through us, like how we're podcasters, and going through Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, I think that's probably the best way to get Disney out there as much as possible.
See, now, I was thinking about this, and I'm going to go back to my Star Wars background, because I was a Disney fan. I watched the movies, Herbie the Love Bug, I went to see those, all the, Robin Hood. But I listen to podcasts now. I've always been a Star Wars fan. And I see what Disney's doing with purchasing Star Wars and purchasing Marvel. And now they're trying to get Fox and building, Galaxy's Edge, building Marvel Land in Paris. And having the Disney Cruise Lines have Marvel Day at Sea and having Star Wars Day at Sea. I think that's kind of what they're doing now, is that they're getting these licenses that kids are getting excited about. And they're hearing on different channels, and like you said, like on the Disney Channel, and they're seeing it. Galaxy's Edge, a Star Wars Land is opening up. So if you're a small kid, I picture a 7-year-old right now hearing about Star Wars Land coming that lives in northern Canada saying, Mom, I want to go to Star Wars Land. And Mom saying, no, we can't afford it. You get it out of your head. You're never going to Star Wars Land. And that kid now growing up thinking, I'm going to do Star Wars Day at Sea. I'm going to go to, Galaxy's Edge. I think that's kind of what Disney's doing now that they used to do in the 70s when we were children.
I agree with you on that, because with all these different intellectual properties it's almost like that's the bait on the hook, and then once the fish grabs, Disney reels in, and it's like, if you go for Star Wars or Marvel, then you got to see everything else. You have to ride Space Mountain. You have to experience the Tiki Room. You have to go, all out.
Yeah, exactly. And I listen to quite a few Star Wars podcasts, and I've been listening to them for years. I've been listening to Star Wars podcasts longer than I have been Disney podcasts. And these guys never, ever talked about Disney World or Disneyland or anything Disney. Now, every episode, someone's talking about Galaxy's Edge, that this is coming. Yeah, guys, you got to start planning your trip to Disneyland. You got to start planning your trip to Disney World. And that's what I think is the big umbrella that Disney is creating right now.
Definitely.
Wow, well, that's quite a story. So I have a question for you, Stan. So you came home from that trip with your daughter, and then you booked a 2-week trip after. Who went on the 2-week trip a year later?
Yeah, just my daughter and myself again.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. And we were able to, and actually Star Wars Weekend was that same weekend. Oh, sorry, not Star Wars Weekend. Star Wars Celebration was that same, in the middle of those 2 weeks. So we did like 5 days at Port Orleans Riverside, and then switched resorts and went to one near the convention center in Orlando to do Star Wars Celebration. And then we went to Pop Century for 5 more days.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so what did you do between your trips that was Disney that kept the fuel for the fire burning?
Yeah, so in between those 2 trips, I'm telling you that there really wasn't too many Disney. I was into Star Wars podcasts at the time. I did start listening to Lou Mangiello on the WDW Radio podcast, and actually I met him on my very second trip a year later. I got to meet him in the park, and that was exciting. The Diz boards was a huge research for me, for finding out about the parks and what was involved, and asking questions and reading other people's questions. And that was probably my most, where I got information from. And yeah, so between that year, it was researching what is happening in the park. And my first time to Magic Kingdom and to all the Disney parks, I felt like I was there before because I researched it so much. It was like I was researching studying for an exam going on this first trip. All my spare time was spent reading about the parks and studying guide maps and the big, what was the unofficial guide to Walt Disney World? It was like the size of an encyclopedia. Mm-hmm. I had that thing read from front to back several times.
Wow, that is quite a story. And so how often do you usually go to Disney World now?
Now, I have an annual pass. I just got it last September. I should have got it last year because I went 3 times last year. Just like trips came up. Like it was like, hey, I got some extra money. And most of my trips now are solo trips, as most of our passengers know. My daughter is now older. There was a period when she went to college for a couple of years, so I wasn't able to afford to pay for her college and to go on trips. So Disney World.
So you just went on trips?
No, I paid for her college. I paid for her college and didn't go for a few years. But now I try to go, a couple times a year, 2 or 3 times a year. I went last September, and then I went a couple weeks ago, and I'm planning another one for this September. Now I'm kind of thinking I'm ready for some international trips. I kind of want to do the Hong Kong, Tokyo route. So that might be 2020's big adventure. I don't think I'm going to renew my annual pass. I think I'm going to...
Going to Disneyland in California ever?
Oh, yeah, I've been. Yeah, I've been. Okay. I'm going again this August.
Okay.
To Disneyland, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Well, George, tell us your Disney story.
Well, going all the way back, I was one that grew up having Disney in my household, but it wasn't like the core center of everything. When I was a baby, my mom designed my room to look like Mickey Mouse and Winnie the Pooh, with my crib and everything, and I had the little stuffed animals everywhere. So right then and there, I guess it was kind of already even though she wasn't trying to, but it was already being implemented, within me that, okay, this is Mickey Mouse, this is Winnie the Pooh, this is Donald Duck. And just growing up, she would buy me the movies. I believe the very first Disney movie that I owned on VHS at the time, because I was a 90s kid. Kids today, they don't even know what a VHS is. But that I believe it was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It was Snow White. Those were the 4 VHSs. It was Snow White, Pinocchio, and Beauty and the Beast. And I just fell in love with them. I just kept on rewatching them, especially Beauty and the Beast. Loved Beauty and the Beast. And it was time where I was at that age where I could experience to go to a movie theater. And my very first movie in the theaters was Aladdin, back in 1992. And it was awe-inspiring to me to actually watch what I was watching at home on the big screen. And then my very first drive-in experience was The Lion King. So any new experience I had was involving Disney. And then it came time, it was, I believe, 1993. I was 3 years old, where my mom started noticing I was doing everything that was involving Disney. I had to watch a Disney movie. I had to have my Disney toys around me, my stuffed animals, everything. And she noticed that there were these Disney sing-along VHS tapes. So she bought them all. It was like 50 cents at the time. And so I had the sing-along VHS tapes, and I went through them all. It played like different scenes for the movies that they, follow the bouncing ball, and you sing along to and I had the Bare Necessities, A Friend Like Me, Be Our Guest, what have you, Hi-Ho. But there was one sing-along tape that stuck out to me, and it was something that I've never noticed before. And it was titled Disneyland Fun. And it had Mickey, Minnie, Goofy, Pluto, and Donald on the front part of the case, and behind them was the castle. And did you want to say something, Stan?
George, just this morning, I watched the Disneyland Paris version of that tape.
I actually watched the YouTube a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I watched that just this morning. Yeah,
I didn't even know they had it.
It's amazing.
So, and at 3 years old, I became very skeptical and optimistic at the same time. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, okay, I can identify these characters. This is Mickey, this is Minnie, but they were in an element that I've never seen them before. And I ran up, and I said, Mommy, I said, look at this. I said, they're real. They're like, they look, I don't know how I put it at 3 years old. I think that's how I said it. It's like, they're real. And at the time, my mom knew about Disney, but she grew up, not really going to the parks or anything. So she said, okay, well, let's put it on. Let's watch it. And from beginning to end, I was literally sitting in front of that television, and I didn't blink. And this was coming from her. I didn't blink, where I was actually seeing these characters live in the human world, and surrounding them was this make-believe place where there's a castle, and there's a spooky mansion, and a jungle river cruise and everything. And so it was like this whole entire make-believe world, and I thought, what is this place? And I started putting two and two together, as a 3-year-old child, and it's like, Disneyland. I'm like, okay, Disneyland. And at the time, I knew Disney's name as a brand and as a company. I didn't really know what the name stood for. I didn't know it was actually the name of Walt Disney himself until I received the anniversary edition of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs on VHS, where it was explaining prior to the movie playing about Walt Disney, and that's when I started getting really into the notion of, okay, Disney isn't just a company name or a brand, it's a person who created all this. And so that kind of stuck with me. On top of seeing Disneyland Fun, sing-along tape, and I told Mom, I said, is this a real place that we could actually go? And she says, yeah, I believe so. I said, I want to go there someday. I want to make it my business. I want to go. And so she said, yep, maybe someday, we'll save up and everything. And from there on in, as the internet, as years went by and, technology grew and we got our first computer, I started doing my research, and it's like, oh, this is Disneyland. Oh, but there's one also in Florida, Walt Disney World. And I said, this one's even closer. And I said to my mom, because I was hitting into my pre-adolescence, so I had that sarcasm. It's like, okay, you promised me how many years? This one's closer. This one's closer, so there's no excuse. You could take me to this one.
So what happened?
So I was 9 years old, and I'll never forget it. I was getting ready for bed, and my mom walked in, and she said, so what do you think we should do this summer? And I said, oh, it doesn't matter, because we usually always do like a family vacation or something. And she said, how about we go to, and she said it nonchalantly, she just goes, how about we go to Disney World? And at first it didn't catch it in my mind. I'm like, yeah, I guess that'll be fine. And I said, whoa. I said, oh, stop and freeze. And I said, are you serious? And she said, yeah. She said, I think we saved enough where, we can go. And I was like playing it cool on the outside, but inside I'm screaming and freaking out like a little girl. So, and then that was during the time it was hitting into the Millennium Celebration at Walt Disney World. So I actually got to experience Disney World into the Millennium. And it was that moment of actually going into the Magic Kingdom for the first time and getting a glance at the castle, going across on the ferry boat, and just seeing the very tip of the castle, and I thought, oh my God, I am here. I'm not seeing it in pictures. I'm not seeing it on TV. I am literally here. And the second I was inside the park itself, it's like, okay, let's do this, let's do that. Like, I couldn't stop myself. Like, it was almost like that if someone were to look at me, it's like, do they have an AA meeting for Disney fanatics? And then just as I got older, it just stuck with me. And after that first time, I craved more. I had to have more. I did more research, and it's like going through the rich history of Disney and the studio and how Walt got where he was and the struggles that he went through. And it's like every little piece of Disney, whether it was movies, television, music, theme parks, I just had to be a part of it. And I had to touch it all and experience it. And it wasn't until 2007 that I was able to go again. When I was in my teen years, I was just graduating from high school. And and you would think it changed a lot, but the moment of stepping into the theme park stayed the same. It never changed for me. It was like, I'm right back here again. And it wasn't until the following year when I turned 18, and I said to myself, I now hold the power that I can start traveling by myself. And I don't have to wait for anybody. I don't have to, I could just save up how much I need and go when I want. And it was the first time I actually experienced a plane ride. I experienced flying very later on in life because my mom was deathly afraid of flying. My first experience, you think at first, oh, you're a little nervous and everything. No, I had to be on the one flight that there was a blizzard outside, and I'm looking out the little window of the plane, and I'm looking, and it's pure whiteout, and I'm thinking, I'm a dead man. But no, I got down there, lickety-split, 2.5 hours, and I thought, wow, that was very quick, and I just got right back into my element and doing all the stuff that I love to do, and
So you're 18 years old and going on a solo trip to Walt Disney World?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. I was 18.
Wow.
That was my
Where'd you
first.
stay?
I stayed at the time. My very first one was All Star Movies.
Oh, okay.
That was the first one, and then as I started getting adjusted to the hotels, and because right then and there, after I came back, I was ready to book my next one. It became an addiction, and I think I went 5 times that year. There were small trips, but I wanted to kind of get my feet wet so I could save up. And my 21st birthday, that's when I went all out, and I did Disney World and Disneyland. 2.5 weeks of sheer bliss. And that's when I stayed at Pop Century. And then I stayed at a Good Neighbor Hotel. A Disney Good Neighbor Hotel for Disneyland. And that was the very first time when I turned 21 that I ever experienced Disneyland. And a lot of people say, oh, what's the difference? It's the same thing. It says Walt Disney World's bigger and Disneyland's smaller. It is a complete different feel when you go into Disneyland as to Walt Disney World. And I think for people who are Disney fans, you could actually feel Walt's presence in that park. And
his fingerprint is all over Disneyland.
Yeah,
for sure.
Definitely. And you could actually feel it. But I enjoy both of them for many different reasons. They have 2 different feels. And it wasn't until that I started, again, with my Disney research and everything, that's when I started looking into Disney cruises. And I know that the Disney cruise line industry was in the mid-90s, but I never really focused on it. I was just focusing on the parks. And I said, I want to experience a Disney cruise. But I said to myself, I only want to experience it that I want to go with someone when I end up finding my better half. I don't know why. It was just something. I was able to do the parks, Disneyland, Disney World on my own and everything, but I said for some reason I want to save a Disney cruise. And in 2013, that's when I met Jess, my wife. And our first conversation over the phone, I ended up saying, "Are you a Disney fan?" And she said, "Oh yeah, I know of Disney. I've seen the movies and everything." And I said, "No, I mean, have you ever been to Disney World or Disneyland?" Or she said, "Oh no, I've never experienced that." She said, "Are you a Disney fan? Have you?" And I said, "Oh, you have no idea." I said, "Fasten your seatbelt because and at the time we really didn't know if it was going to turn into anything, but I said, as hypothetical, I said, if this turns into what I think it's going to turn into, you're going to eat, sleep, and breathe Disney 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year."
And how did that go over when you said that?
I think she had more of an okay type of thing, like one of those things where someone says something, but it's like, okay, they're exaggerating or they're being sarcastic. No, when she moved out to Pittsburgh with me, and 1 year later for our 1 year anniversary, I thought that was the perfect time to take her on her first Disney trip. And I thought, okay, well, we're going to do Walt Disney World. And I initially had it for a week. And then I was looking at the different prices for a Disney cruise, and I said, "Babe," how about we do half Disney World for our vacation and then a Disney cruise? And she said, "Yeah, definitely, let's do that." She's never been on a cruise before. I never have, and as I said, I wanted to wait. And that's when we did my very first land and sea Disney vacation and her first Disney vacation ever. So it was very special, to share and experience the Disney cruise with her. And now we're about to go on our 7th one in 2020. And it's one of those things that we just love, going on a Disney cruise, and I love going back to the parks. And I find that it was the same place but different experiences based on the time that I was going. I experienced it when I was a child. I experienced it when I was a teenager. I experienced it as a bachelor and as a married man and a father, you know, taking my son there and having him experience what I also had as a child. And it's like just a never-ending, you know, circle of life, you know, no pun intended, not to sound too cheesy, but I mean it, and I will keep on going. I will keep on going until I have my last breath here on earth. And that's how it's going to be, and no one can change my mind.
One thing I love about when people tell their Disney stories is they have such passion when they tell them, and they have this beautiful, like, romanticized story, and they're always so uplifting to hear. And I assume if you're listening to this podcast, you also have a Disney story to tell, and you're not the people that roll your eyes at us. And we all have eye rollers in our lives. Is that correct?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So if you're my friends or family and you're just listening because you want to find out why I'm a weirdo, but I think everybody else has a Disney story to tell, and it makes me happy to see how people came to this wonderful, crazy thing that we all have in common. And I'll give you a short version of my Disney story. I went to Disney as a child a few times, and then I've always loved it. I've always loved the history of Walt Disney, the person, the history of the parks and how they came to be. My experience is similar to Stan's in that, and watching the show on TV and being fascinated by it. And then when I was an adult and had children, and it was like you all were saying, you were in charge of your own vacations now, so you could go, you know, where you wanted, and we would go. And I don't live terribly far from Disney World. I live about 7.5 hours in a car, and we went several times with our children. And I was like you all. I was studying and researching all the time, everything on the internet, constantly. I mean, I've loved it my whole life, but then I really kind of got obsessed as an adult, and I started listening to WDW Today podcast. It doesn't exist in the same form anymore. It was with Matt Hochberg and Lynn Testa, and anyway, and then that just snowballed, and I listened to that all the time. And then I started reading the Unofficial Guide to Walt Disney World, and then I started writing for them and doing research for them, and I wrote on the Touring Plans blog. And then I became a travel agent with NEI and Mouse Fan Travel because I loved it so much. I was like, I have to make this my job because I love Disney so much. I have to have it be my job. And I've been a travel agent with Mouse Fan Travel since 2009. And then I got to meet even more people that are obsessed with Disney World. And I got to meet one of my best friends in the entire world who she takes my love of Disney, her level is a whole new level. And anyway, that's sort of the short version of my story, but it just makes me happy to this day. And anyway.
So Caroline,
yeah.
Let me ask you. So when you were doing all this planning, were you like me where you had this Excel spreadsheet made up and you had every minute planned and where you were going to eat and what attraction you're going to ride and in what order? And as soon as you entered the park, you might as well have crumpled it up and thrown it away?
Well, I didn't have it, okay, so I didn't have a spreadsheet, but I had everything planned out, and my family, I know you have to be politically correct, and this isn't politically correct, but I'm going to say it anyway. They used to call me the Disney Nazi, and, you know, because there's like that episode of Seinfeld, the Soup Nazi, that's where they got it. Anyway, so they used to call me the Disney Nazi because I would be like, we have to do this, we have to be, you know, I had the plan, I'm much more chill now. I don't have a plan at all. I go, I have a good time now. It's completely different. But, yes, I was just like that.
That's exactly how I was. And the way I had it planned was our very first trip. I'm going to walk up Main Street and get straight to the castle and put my hand on the castle. And I took a picture of my hand on the castle, and my daughter did the same. And I took a picture of her hand on the castle. And then we were going to do the Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger spin. And this is, of course, rope drop and watching the train show. And then we were going to go to Chef Mickey's at the Contemporary. That was our plan. Well, the ride broke down on Buzz Lightyear. Very first attraction, very first visit, the ride broke down. And we were late getting to Chef Mickey's because of it. And the rest of the week was ruined. No, it wasn't ruined, but it's kind of like, well, I guess there's hooks in this planning that you can do.
The best laid plans, right?
Yeah.
But I think also, especially when you're on a Disney vacation, sometimes the things that you don't plan are the most memorable.
Absolutely.
Amen. I agree 100%. Okay, so I know this episode's going a little bit long, but I just want to... So if you're listening to this episode, we know you have a Disney story to tell, and we would love to hear it. You can please share it with us on our Facebook page. But the other thing I want to talk about before we go is, and I alluded to this a minute ago, is the eye rollers in your life. The people that just don't get it or get you. And I was just wondering how you handle that. Or do you have eye rollers in your life, or does everybody think it's just great how much you love Disney?
Actually, now I talk to people and they're actually fascinated by it and they want to know more because, they're like, oh, really? That sounds cool. That sounds great. But as a kid growing up, not necessarily a kid, but I'd say more so in my teenage years is when I got bombarded hard with that's for babies, that's for young kids, act your age, this and that. And I was fortunate enough to be a person to not feed into peer pressure. Mm-hmm. And it was just one of those things that the more people were telling me not to, or how could you, the more I did it for myself. And the more that I just kept on looking into it, and I'm glad I turned out that way, because if I would have listened to naysayers, so to speak, then I wouldn't be where I am today with Disney.
Right. Stan, do you have people that sort of go, oh, Stan, and not Disney? Do you have those people in your life?
Yeah, but they're few and far between. I think the people that don't get it, they don't, at least not to my face. they don't. Most of the people I interact with are going to be at work, and a lot of them are they hear my Disney stories day in and day out, and they put up with it. Others are more interested in them. I think they appreciate my enthusiasm. I think out of anybody that rolls their eyes the most is probably my wife.
Yeah,
she also hears it more than anybody else as well.
Right.
And she's gone to Disney World now, and she's done a couple of Disney cruises, and she gets it. Yeah. And she does. Actually, just today we were talking about going maybe in January next year to Walt Disney World again.
Oh, good.
But, she does want it. She does want to go back, but yeah, I think she's tired of hearing her husband talking about it so much.
Right. And we get it. It's not, everybody doesn't have to have the level of love for it that we do. I mean, I had to make it my business so that I could talk about it.
That's a good way to do it.
I know, but we get it. And, different strokes for different folks. And it was really sweet to hear your stories, Stan and George. That was really sweet. And we would love to hear yours, passengers. And thank you for going on this journey with us so that we can talk about Disney every week, because boy, do we love it. And we will look forward to our next tour together. Take it away, Ken.
As we near our 1-year anniversary, we have decided to have another amazing giveaway. This time we're giving away a Kevin John Jungle Cruise print generously donated by Kevin John Studios. This print will be hand-signed by the Disney Master Artist himself and include a hand-drawn drawing on the mat. To enter, simply visit our Grand Circle Tour Facebook page and like and share this adventure. You can receive another entry by tweeting out that you're listening. Be sure to use the hashtag GCTPodcast.
Hi, I'm Realtor Victor Naraki from CelebratingFlorida.com. I specialize now in homes surrounding Disney World. And my first entrance to Disney World, literally, was traveling on the monorail in August of 1972 after being on World Drive and seeing cars overheated because it was just packed that day. And I saw the Contemporary Hotel in front of us, and we were in the first car. I remember that. And I said to my father, what is that we're driving through? And my father told me it was the hotel. And I was like, wow. Gee, Dad, why didn't we stay there? And he said, well, they're booked up 2 years in advance. And I remember thinking, my goodness, he checked. And then we went on. I remember so many different rides. And my favorite, I'm sorry to say, was 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. But we went on, oh my gosh, we got on Pirates of the Caribbean. We went on the Teacups. My mother and sister didn't go on the Teacups. I seem to remember us going on Carousel of Progress. So many different things that I remembered when I took my next trip wasn't until the 90s in Disneyland. And now I live here near Disney World and can go anytime I want. So if you're thinking of moving to Florida or the Disney World area, get in contact with me at my Facebook page at Nawrocki Realtor, Nawrocki, or celebratingflorida.com. But thank you for letting me share this moment with you. I have the greatest memories of Disney World, and I keep making them every day.